So I go away for 1 year to care for my dying father, and when I come back, there are $3 million mansions sitting on my property, and the HOA president is living in one of them like she's the Queen of England. I'm talking about 2.1 million worth of houses, built without my permission, on land I've owned for 30 years. The sound of construction equipment should have been my first clue, but all I hear now is the gentle hum of sprinkler systems watering lawns that were illegally planted on my dirt. The smell of fresh mulch and that new house paint smell fills my truck as I sit there, jaw on the floor, staring at what looks like a luxury real estate commercial. Except it's my freaking land. And Dolores? She's got the nerve to wave at me from her stolen front porch like we're neighbors. What would you do if you came home to find strangers living in houses on your land? Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and if you've ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA. Let me back up and tell you how we got here, because this story starts way before Dolores decided to play real estate mogul with my inheritance. My name's Garrett, I'm 52, and I've been an electrician for most of my adult life. The property we're talking about? That's a 2.5-acre corner lot in Pine Ridge Estates that my grandfather bought back in 1967 for $3,000. Yeah, you heard that right, $3,000. The sound of his old Chevy truck pulling into that dirt driveway is one of my earliest memories, gravel popping under those worn tires like popcorn. I always planned to build my retirement cabin there, but life keeps interrupting your plans, doesn't it? Divorce, work, just never seemed like the right time. But I kept that land pristine, paid every tax bill, every HOA fee religiously. Then my dad got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, the aggressive kind that doesn't negotiate. He was living alone in Nebraska, stubborn as a rusted bolt, refusing help. So I did what any decent son would do, took unpaid leave and became his full-time caregiver. Before leaving, I told my neighbor Mitch I'd be gone 12 to 18 months. Everything would be handled automatically, including those damn HOA fees. That's when Dolores Whitfield entered my life like a tornado in a trailer park. She'd moved from California 6 months earlier. You know the type. Immediately ran for HOA president because she needed something to control after her divorce. Real estate background, always yakking about property values and community standards. The kind of woman who'd measure your grass height with a ruler and fine you for having the wrong shade of mailbox. While I'm in Nebraska, holding my father's hand in a room that reeks of antiseptic and fear, Dolores starts her campaign of harassment. First certified letter arrives like a slap in the face. Property maintenance violation. Final notice. Apparently, my vacant lot was an eyesore threatening neighborhood property values. I'm thinking, lady, it's supposed to be empty. That's what vacant means. But Dolores isn't done. $200 a day in fines for unmaintained landscaping. Then, abandoned property violations, because I wasn't there to trim weeds while watching my father die. The manila envelopes started piling up on my kitchen counter back home. My neighbor Mitch would send me photos of the growing stack. The texture of those envelopes became as familiar as my father's papery skin during his final weeks. Every time one arrived, I'd feel my blood pressure spike. But what choice did I have? Leave my dying dad to argue with some HOA wannabe dictator about grass height? Then came the letter that should have terrified me. Emergency Community Development Initiative. Dolores claimed my abandoned property was dragging down the entire neighborhood. She was exploring all legal options to remedy the situation in the community's best interest. I should have dropped everything and driven home, but my father was taking his last breaths, and honestly, I figured she was just another petty tyrant blowing hot air. How wrong I was. By the time I buried Dad and handled his estate, the smell of old legal documents and mothballed suits still haunts me. I owed the HOA over $4,000. $4,000 for letting nature take its course on empty land while I said goodbye to the man who taught me everything about honor and hard work. The drive home took 2 days of interstate coffee and truck stop regret. I kept thinking about my grandfather's calloused hands signing that original deed, about the railroad pension money he invested in Pine Ridge when it was just prairie and possibility. I planned to pay Dolores's ridiculous fines, then finally build that cabin. Maybe having a project would help with the grief. There's something healing about creating something beautiful after you've spent months watching everything fall apart. Turns out, some people see grief as opportunity. So there I am, pulling into Pine Ridge Estates after the longest year of my life, expecting to see my empty corner lot and maybe some overgrown weeds to deal with. Instead, I hear construction noise where there shouldn't be any construction noise. The sound hits me first. Nail guns popping like rapid fire, the beep, beep, beep of machinery backing up. Then I smell it. Fresh concrete, new lumber, that distinct scent of a construction site in full swing. My brain's still trying to process what my senses are telling me when I round the corner onto my street. 3 houses. Not just any houses. Luxury mansions that look like they belong in some gated community catalog. We're talking 4,500 square feet each, with those fancy stone facades and professional landscaping. There are sold signs planted in what used to be my front yard, for crying out loud, on my land. I sit in my truck for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles go white. The leather feels slippery under my sweaty palms. Maybe I took a wrong turn, maybe grief scrambled my brain. But no, there's Mitch's house across the street, same ugly yellow siding. That's when I see her, Dolores Whitfield, standing in the doorway of the biggest mansion like she's the queen of her own little real estate empire. She's got this smug smile that says, "What are you gonna do about it?" Well, Dolores, let me show you. I park my truck on my own property and walk up to her stolen front door. "Dolores," I say, keeping my voice level. "Interesting what you've done with my place." She doesn't even blink. "Oh, Garrett, welcome back. I trust your family situation worked out well?" Family situation. Like my father dying was some scheduling conflict. "What I'm seeing," I continue, "is 3 houses built on land I own. Want to explain how that works?" She pulls out a folder thicker than a phone book. "Emergency community development. Your abandoned property was creating liability issues for the entire neighborhood. The HOA exercised our authority under the Community Improvement Clause. I've dealt with enough scam artists trying to overcharge for electrical work. This smells like day-old fish. Show me the legal paperwork that says you can steal my property." She hands me documents that look official until you read them. Falsified transfer deeds, forged signatures, creative fiction at its finest. But here's the thing. My grandfather survived the Depression by keeping original documents in a fireproof safe, and he drilled into me that real property ownership only counts when it's recorded at the county level. No HOA gets to override actual deeds, no matter how fancy their letterhead looks. "This is cute," I tell her, waving her fake papers. "But I've got the real deed, you know, the one that shows I've owned this land for 30 years and never missed a payment." Funny how that works. The smug smile melts off her face like ice cream in August. My counterattack starts immediately. First stop, County Records Office, where I discover something that makes my electrician brain want to short circuit. The building permits for all 3 houses were issued using completely forged ownership documents. Someone created fake deed transfers showing the HOA taking my property for unpaid assessments. But here's what blew my mind. The county inspector pulls me aside and drops a bombshell that changes everything. "Those permits raised red flags from day one," he admits. "But the HOA's attorney vouched for everything. Turns out that attorney? He's Dolores's brother-in-law. They've been running this scam for months, just waiting for the right target. So it's not just theft, it's conspiracy. My dad used to say that when people show you who they really are, believe them the first time. Dolores just showed me she's a professional predator. I immediately demand an emergency HOA meeting within 48 hours. By law, they have to comply. While they're scrambling to cover their tracks, I'm building my case. I remember reading somewhere that most states allow you to record conversations as long as one person knows about it, in this case, me. So I download recording apps, photograph every document, and start calling everyone who might have witnessed Dolores's threats. But the real kicker comes when I dig deeper into the permits. Those 3 families who bought houses? They have no idea their deeds are worthless. They paid $850,000 each for homes built on stolen land. The inspector shows me something that makes my blood run cold. Dolores personally guaranteed the $2.1 million construction loan using my property as collateral. She's been planning this theft for months, just waiting for someone to leave town long enough. That night, I sit in my truck looking at those houses, families inside making dinner, kids doing homework, people living their lives in homes built on a foundation of lies. This isn't just about my land anymore. It's about protecting innocent families from a predator who's about to destroy their lives for profit. Time to show Dolores what happens when you mess with the wrong electrician. The emergency HOA meeting happens in Dolores's stolen living room, which is just the kind of twisted irony that makes my jaw clench. She's sitting there in a leather chair that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent, surrounded by her hand-picked cronies who look like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Garrett," she starts, using that tone kindergarten teachers use on slow kids, "I understand you're upset about the recent community improvements, but everything was done according to proper procedures. The air in that room smells like new carpet and lies." I pull out my phone and hit record. That little red dot feels like loading a bullet. "Proper procedures," I repeat. "You mean the ones where you forge someone's signature and steal their land?" "Yeah, real proper, Dolores." That's when she escalates faster than a house fire. She's hired some downtown shark, the kind of lawyer who charges more per hour than I make in a week. This guy shows up wearing a suit that probably costs more than my truck, carrying a briefcase that screams, "I'm here to intimidate the little people." "My client has established valid adverse possession rights," he announces, like he's reading a death sentence. I almost snort coffee through my nose. My grandfather dealt with enough smooth-talking vultures trying to buy his railroad pension cheap. When someone drowns you in fancy legal words, they're usually trying to hide something embarrassingly simple. "Counselor," I say, leaning back in my chair, "adverse possession requires 10 continuous years of occupation. These houses have been here 6 months. You're only off by about 9.5 years, but hey, who's counting?" The lawyer's face turns the color of a stop sign, but Dolores isn't finished with her performance. "While I was in Nebraska watching my father die, she was busy spreading poison around the neighborhood. Suddenly, I'm mentally unstable and making threats against innocent families." The woman's got more creativity than a fiction writer. Then she files a restraining order against me on my own property. I've got to admire the sheer audacity. It's like watching someone steal your car then complaining about your driving. But here's where 20 years of dealing with building inspectors and permit offices pays off. I know how to build a paper trail that would make an accountant weep with joy. While Dolores is playing amateur lawyer, I'm assembling a case that could bury her. First stop, Legal Aid Society, where I meet Sarah Chen, a lawyer who looks like she could bench press a filing cabinet and has the kind of smile that says, "I eat fraudsters for breakfast." "This is textbook real estate theft," she tells me, flipping through my documents. "The good news? We can prove everything. The bad news? It's about to get very, very ugly." Sarah helps me file criminal charges, not civil lawsuit stuff, but actual go-to-prison charges. The detective who takes my statement has the weary look of someone who's seen this movie before. "HOA scams are the new thing," he explains. "They target people dealing with family crises, counting on them being too overwhelmed to fight back." Wrong family crisis, wrong victim. That's when I meet Jessica Martinez, a newspaper reporter with the kind of hungry look that makes corrupt officials nervous. Over coffee that tastes like motor oil, she asks the question that changes everything. "What do you know about Dolores's time in California?" Turns out, our HOA president isn't just ambitious, she's a serial predator. Jessica's investigation uncovers something that makes my blood turn to ice water. Dolores pulled this exact same scam twice before, targeting a widower in San Diego and a military family deployed overseas. Both cases settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements, but Jessica has sources who remember the details. We're not dealing with some opportunistic amateur. This is a professional who studies grief like a disease, then moves in for the kill. The story runs with the headline, "Local Electrician Battles Serial Land Thief." Suddenly my phone rings non-stop. Neighbors start emerging from the woodwork with stories about Dolores's reign of terror. Elderly Mrs. Patterson fined $500 for having the wrong shade of roses. The Johnson family threatened with lawsuits over their kid's basketball hoop. But the real bombshell drops when Jessica digs into the HOA's books. Those financial transparency laws I'd read about? Turns out they're more important than I thought. The Pine Ridge HOA isn't just broke, they're drowning in debt from Dolores's previous improvement schemes. The construction loan for my property? That's just the tip of an iceberg that includes borrowed money against the community center, the road repair fund, even the emergency reserves. We're talking about a $500,000 hole that Dolores planned to fill with profits from selling stolen land. And those 3 innocent families? Their purchase money went straight into accounts controlled by Dolores, making them victims of the same fraud scheme that targeted me. That night, I sit on my truck tailgate listening to automatic sprinklers water grass that grows on stolen soil. Sometimes justice isn't about revenge, it's about making sure the next victim never exists. Now Dolores is getting desperate, and desperate people make the kind of mistakes that end up as evidence in court cases. First, she tries to buy me off. I'm grabbing coffee at the gas station when she corners me with an envelope thick enough to stop a bullet. The smell of burnt coffee and her expensive perfume creates this nauseating cocktail that perfectly captures the moment. "Garrett," she says, putting on her best reasonable person voice, "I know we've had our differences, but I'm prepared to offer you a settlement. $100,000 cash, and you sign a quitclaim deed making this whole unpleasant situation disappear." I take the envelope just to see how desperate she really is. It's a cashier's check, which means she liquidated something major to raise this kind of money. But here's what Dolores doesn't understand about guys like me. My grandfather taught me that some things aren't for sale, no matter what the price tag says. "You know what, Dolores?" I hand back her blood money. "You could offer me $10 million, and it wouldn't change the fact that you're a common thief. Keep your cash. You're going to need every penny for your defense attorney." The mask slips completely. Within 3 days, I'm drowning in bogus legal documents claiming I owe the HOA $50,000 in accumulated fines, legal fees, and emergency development costs. She's literally trying to make me pay for the privilege of having my land stolen. It's like getting mugged, then receiving a bill for the mugger's time and effort. But while Dolores is busy playing paper terrorist, I'm building something she can't fight, a coalition of fed-up neighbors who've been waiting years for someone to take her on. Mitch introduces me to Bob Peterson, whose home woodworking shop got shut down for excessive noise violations when he was building toy chests for his grandkids. Then there's Linda Kowalski, fined $300 for planting native wildflowers because they weren't on Dolores's approved plant list. We start meeting in Linda's kitchen, and let me tell you, nothing builds solidarity like sharing war stories over coffee that doesn't taste like it was filtered through old socks. The warmth of that kitchen, with its mismatched chairs and handmade quilts, feels like the opposite of everything Dolores represents. That's when Sarah drops a legal bombshell that changes the entire game. She's been studying the HOA's original governing documents, the ones Dolores apparently never bothered reading, and discovers something beautiful. Any construction project over $50,000 requires written approval from 75% of all homeowners. Guess what vote never happened? I remember my dad telling me that the devil's always in the details, and bureaucrats usually hang themselves with their own red tape. Turns out when HOA boards violate their own governing documents, homeowners can sue for breach of contract and recover attorney fees. Dolores broke the rules before she even got to the grand theft part. Meanwhile, Jessica's investigation keeps peeling back layers of corruption like a rotten onion. The Pine Ridge HOA isn't just broke, they're drowning in debt from years of mismanagement. Previous boards borrowed against everything, and Dolores promised to solve their $500,000 crisis through strategic community development. Translation: steal my land, build luxury houses, use the profits to cover debts, and pay herself a nice fat management fee. But here's where everything explodes in the most beautiful way possible. Jessica uncovers the smoking gun that makes my hands shake when I read it. When Dolores applied for builder's risk insurance to cover the construction, she had to list the actual property owner to get coverage. Even while forging documents to steal my land, she needed to use my legitimate ownership for the insurance company. The policy application, signed under penalty of perjury, lists Garrett Morrison, that's me, as the rightful owner of the property where she's building houses without permission. She literally signed a legal document admitting I own the land while simultaneously claiming she has the right to develop it. That's not just insurance fraud. That's evidence of criminal intent with her signature on it. When insurance companies discover they've been played for suckers, they don't just want their money back. They bring in forensic investigators who make homicide detectives look casual. We're talking about people who can reconstruct financial crimes from tiny paper trails and inconsistent statements. The 3 families living in those houses, they're starting to figure out they're not homeowners, they're victims. Their title insurance is worthless because you can't insure ownership of stolen property. The banks that gave them mortgages are making threatening noises about foreclosure because the underlying ownership is fraudulent. And here's the kicker. These families aren't mad at me anymore. They're furious at Dolores for destroying their lives to feed her greed. That night, I stand on my property line listening to the sound of sprinklers watering lawns that shouldn't exist, on land that's been in my family since Lyndon Johnson was president. The truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deep you try to bury it, and Dolores is about to drown in it. That's when Sarah calls me with news that makes my coffee taste like victory. "Garrett, you need to sit down for this," she says, and I can hear the excitement in her voice crackling through my phone speaker. The insurance company's investigation just hit the jackpot. Turns out, when Dolores filed that builder's risk insurance policy listing me as the property owner, she opened a door she can't close. The insurance company, let's call them Fortress Insurance, is now on the hook for $2.1 million in construction costs based on a fraudulent application. And when insurance companies lose that kind of money to fraud, they don't just write it off as a business expense. They declare war. Fortress has assigned their top fraud investigator to the case, Sarah continues. This guy usually works international money laundering schemes. Dolores just graduated from small-time property theft to federal insurance fraud. But here's the part that makes me want to do a victory dance in my driveway. Fortress Insurance is now legally obligated to side with me. Since I'm the legitimate property owner they've been insuring without my knowledge, they have to protect their investment by protecting my rights. Translation: I now have a multi-billion-dollar insurance company's legal team fighting my battle for free. The power dynamic just shifted so hard it probably registered on seismic equipment. Within 48 hours, everything changes faster than a blown fuse. Fortress freezes all HOA accounts pending their investigation. The bank that gave Dolores the construction loan suddenly develops a serious interest in reviewing their documentation procedures. And the state attorney general's office, the people who prosecute organized crime, opens a file with Dolores's name on it. Meanwhile, the three families living in my houses discover they're not just victims. They're evidence in a criminal investigation. Their purchase contracts, mortgage applications, and title documents all become exhibits in what's shaping up to be a textbook case of real estate fraud conspiracy. But here's the revelation that changes everything. Those families aren't enemies anymore. They're my allies. The Hendersons, who live in the middle house with their 2 kids, come to my door on a Thursday evening. Mrs. Henderson's holding a casserole that smells like comfort food and apologies. "Mr. Morrison," she says, "we had no idea about any of this. We just wanted a safe place to raise our children. If there's anything we can do to help catch the person who did this to all of us." The Patels from the corner house join us, followed by the Rodriguez family from the largest home, the one Dolores was living in before Fortress Insurance changed the locks. These people aren't just innocent victims. They're families who've been violated by the same predator who targeted me. That's when I realize something that makes my electrician brain start sparking with possibilities. I'm not just the rightful owner of this property anymore. I'm the landlord of 3 families who desperately want to stay in their homes, and I have the legal right to charge rent for their occupation of my land. Fair market rent for luxury homes like these runs about $4,500 per month each. That's $13,500 monthly income or $162,000 annually until this situation gets resolved. Even better, since the houses were completed 6 months ago, there's already $81,000 in back rent owed. But here's the beautiful part. Instead of trying to evict these families, I can offer them something Dolores never could: legitimate ownership at fair prices, not the inflated values she was trying to scam them for. The insurance company wants to minimize their losses. The bank wants to recover their loan, the families want to keep their homes, and I want justice plus compensation for having my property stolen. For the first time since this nightmare started, I can see a path where everybody wins, everybody except the woman who started this mess. Sarah explains the leverage I now hold. Dolores committed multiple felonies. The insurance company is legally obligated to support your claim, and you have the right to collect rent from day one of construction. She's not just caught, she's buried. That evening, I walk around my property with my grandfather's old measuring tape, calculating square footage and rental potential. The sound of children playing in those stolen yards doesn't make me angry anymore. It makes me think about justice and second chances, and how sometimes the best revenge is building something better from the wreckage of someone else's greed. The next morning, I do something that would have seemed impossible a week ago. I invite all 3 families over for coffee and planning session in Mitch's garage. The smell of motor oil and old leather from his workbench creates this oddly comforting atmosphere while we figure out how to turn this disaster into something that works for everyone. "Here's the situation," I tell them, spreading Sarah's legal documents across Mitch's workbench like we're planning a military operation. "You folks paid good money for homes you thought you were buying legitimately. I own the land those homes are sitting on. Dolores screwed all of us, but that doesn't mean we can't fix this together. Mrs. Henderson, a teacher who looks like she's been losing sleep for weeks, speaks up first. What are our options? We can't afford to lose our down payments and still have to find somewhere else to live. That's when I explained the rent theory that Sarah laid out for me. In property law, the rightful owner has the legal right to charge fair market rent to anyone occupying their land without permission, regardless of how the structures got there. It's like if someone built a garage on your driveway, you don't have to let them keep it for free just because they put work into it. Here's what I'm thinking, I continue, pulling out rental comparisons Sarah helped me research. These houses would normally rent for $4,500 each per month, but you folks are victims of the same crime I am. So instead of charging market rate, how about we work out something that benefits everyone? The proposal I lay out makes the room go quiet. I'll charge them $3,000 per month each in rent, well below market rate, while they save money for down payments to eventually buy the houses at actual construction cost, not Dolores's inflated prices. Mr. Patel, who works in accounting and has that careful way of speaking that comes from double-checking everything, runs the numbers on his phone. That's actually less than our mortgage payments were going to be, and we don't lose our investment. Plus, adds Mrs. Rodriguez, whose husband is deployed overseas and definitely doesn't need this kind of stress, we get to keep our kids in the same schools and neighborhoods they're already settled in. While the families are digesting this proposal, I'm coordinating with what's becoming a pretty impressive team of allies. Sarah has connected me with a forensic accountant who specializes in HOA fraud. Apparently, it's more common than people think. This guy, Frank, has the kind of methodical brain that can track financial crimes through layers of fake documentation and shell companies. Frank discovers that Dolores has been skimming HOA funds for months using administrative fees and consulting payments to move money into personal accounts. The Pine Ridge HOA's books look like a crime scene, with missing receipts, unauthorized expenditures, and financial transfers that make no legal sense. Meanwhile, Jessica's newspaper coverage has attracted attention from a regional property rights advocacy group that deals with HOA overreach cases. They're offering both legal support and media coordination to make sure this story gets the attention it deserves. Bob Peterson, the neighbor whose workshop got shut down, turns out to have connections with local contractors who are disgusted by what happened. These guys volunteer their time to assess the build quality of the three houses, document any construction shortcuts, and provide expert testimony about fair market values. The technical preparation feels like wiring a complex electrical system. Every connection has to be perfect, or the whole thing shorts out. I learned to use smartphone apps that create admissible legal recordings. Frank teaches me to build spreadsheets that track every penny of expenses, communications, and evidence in a format that courts actually understand. Sarah walks me through setting up secure cloud storage for all our documents and photos. Apparently, digital evidence has specific legal requirements to be admissible in court. I create a simple website where we post timeline updates and public documents, partly to keep everyone informed and partly because transparency makes it harder for people to lie about what really happened. The most important discovery comes when Frank digs into the insurance company's files. Fortress Insurance isn't just angry about being defrauded. They're legally required to pursue full recovery, which means they have to support my ownership claim to protect their own interests. Here's something most people don't know. Frank explains while we're going through financial records in his office that smells like coffee and determination. Always maintain detailed written records of every HOA interaction. Email follow-ups after every phone conversation create a legal evidence trail that's admissible in court and can prove patterns of harassment or fraud. That evening, the three families and I meet again to finalize our rental agreements. The sound of kids playing in the background, kids who get to stay in their homes instead of being uprooted by someone else's greed, makes everything feel worthwhile. We're not just fighting fraud anymore. We're building a community that actually works for the people who live in it. And Dolores, she's about to discover what happens when you mess with people who know how to work together. Now that I've got a solid coalition and the insurance company backing my play, Dolores decides to go full scorched earth. And let me tell you, watching a desperate criminal lose their mind is both terrifying and oddly satisfying. It starts with the Whisper campaign. Suddenly, I'm supposedly a dangerous ex-con with a history of violence against women. Never mind that my only criminal record is a speeding ticket from 1998. Dolores is spreading rumors faster than a grease fire. She's telling anyone who'll listen that I'm mentally unstable and threatening innocent families. The irony tastes bitter, like burnt coffee on a Monday morning. Then she tries to turn the three families against me by claiming I'm planning to extort them with unreasonable rent demands. She shows up at the Hendersons' door with a folder full of legal documents, trying to convince them to sue me for emotional distress and illegal occupation charges. Mrs. Henderson calls me that same evening, her voice shaking with anger. That woman actually had the nerve to tell me you were going to make us homeless. She wanted us to sign some kind of lawsuit paperwork against you. What did you tell her? I ask. I told her to get off my property before I called the police. I'm starting to really like these people. But Dolores isn't done with her amateur intimidation campaign. She hires a private investigator, some greasy little weasel who starts following me around town, taking pictures, digging through my trash, probably hoping to find something embarrassing to use against me. Joke's on him. My most scandalous secret is that I sometimes eat cereal for dinner and watch old westerns until midnight. The harassment escalates when she files 3 separate frivolous lawsuits claiming emotional distress, defamation of character, and my personal favorite, interference with business operations. Apparently exposing her crimes is interfering with her criminal enterprise. The legal system is weird sometimes. That's when I make one of the smartest decisions of this whole mess. I install security cameras around my property perimeter. Frank, the forensic accountant, recommended a system that records everything in HD with night vision and motion detection. The smell of fresh electronics and new cable reminds me of rewiring houses, satisfying work that protects people from dangerous situations. Within 2 weeks, those cameras pay for themselves. They catch Dolores and 2 guys I don't recognize walking around the houses at night, taking photos and having conversations that look suspiciously like planning sessions. One night, the motion sensors catch them actually trying to enter the Rodriguez house while the family is visiting relatives, breaking and entering on top of everything else. This woman has 0 survival instincts. But here's where it gets interesting. The private investigator she hired to dig up dirt on me finds something, all right. Just not what she was expecting. He discovers that Dolores owes over $300,000 in personal debts from California. Credit cards, personal loans, even money she borrowed against her previous house before fleeing the state. Those legal settlements she made with her previous victims? They barely covered her debts, which is why she moved to Pine Ridge looking for fresh targets. This isn't just greed. It's desperation. She's a compulsive gambler who's been using real estate fraud to pay off mounting debts, and I just happen to be her next mark. When Frank gets access to her banking records through the criminal investigation, we discover something that makes my blood run cold. She's been skimming money from the HOA accounts for months, using fake invoices and phantom consulting fees to move community funds into her personal accounts. The Pine Ridge HOA wasn't just broke when she started her scam. She's the one who bankrupted it in the first place. Meanwhile, the 3 families are settling into their rental arrangements like they've lived here forever. The sound of kids riding bikes in the evening and neighbors helping each other with yard work feels like what community was supposed to be before people like Dolores decided to weaponize homeowners associations. Mrs. Patel starts a small vegetable garden behind their house, and she shares tomatoes with everyone. Mr. Henderson, who's a mechanic, helps me install better security lighting around the perimeter. These people aren't just tenants, they're neighbors who actually give a damn about each other. The mini twist that changes everything comes when the FBI takes over the case. Apparently, using mail fraud to steal property and filing false insurance claims makes this a federal crime, not just a local matter. When federal agents show up at your door, your neighborhood drama just became a national case study. Jessica's newspaper coverage attracts attention from 3 other states where similar HOA fraud schemes are under investigation. Suddenly, my small-town property dispute is part of a larger pattern of organized real estate crime. That night, I sit on my truck tailgate listening to automatic sprinklers water lawns that actually belong to the people living in them now. The smell of evening barbecues and the sound of children playing reminds me why property rights matter, not just for ownership, but for the communities we build on the land we protect. Dolores picked the wrong electrician to mess with, and now she's about to get schooled by the federal government. Desperation makes people do spectacularly stupid things, and Dolores is about to win the gold medal for criminal stupidity. When the FBI opens their investigation, her first brilliant idea is to flee the state. I'm not kidding. This woman actually tries to board a plane to Mexico with 2 suitcases full of cash and what looks like every important document she owns. Airport security stops her like she's in some bad crime movie, and suddenly her passport gets confiscated pending the criminal investigation. You can't make this stuff up. But getting caught running just makes everything worse for her. The federal prosecutor handling the case tells Sarah that flight risk behavior usually convinces judges to deny bail, which means Dolores gets to think about her life choices from a jail cell while awaiting trial. From behind bars, she tries one last desperate Hail Mary, offering to sign over the deed to the largest house as compensation for all the trouble she's caused. The smell of her panic is so thick you could cut it with a knife. She wants to give you a house she never owned, built on land she stole, as payment for stealing your land, Sarah explains to me over lunch at the diner. It's like a snake trying to pay you back by offering you your own wallet. When that brilliant strategy fails, Dolores files for bankruptcy, hoping to avoid paying damages. But here's something she apparently never learned. You can discharge financial debts in bankruptcy, but criminal charges don't just disappear because you're broke. Meanwhile, something beautiful is happening in the community. The three families organize a block party to thank the neighbors who supported them during this mess. The sound of kids laughing and adults actually talking to each other instead of arguing about HOA violations feels like a different world from the one Dolores tried to create. Local contractors who were disgusted by the fraud volunteer their labor to improve the common areas using money that Frank's investigation recovered from Dolores's personal accounts. Bob Peterson leads a project to install a playground where Dolores used to park her luxury car, the same car that's now being sold to pay restitution. I propose something that makes everyone's eyes light up, using part of my rental income to start a community improvement fund. Real improvements, chosen by the people who actually live here, not some petty tyrant's vision of suburban perfection. The legal proceedings move faster than I expected. The grand jury takes about 30 minutes to indict Dolores on multiple felony charges: theft, fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and federal mail fraud, for using the postal system to commit crimes. The evidence is so overwhelming that her new attorney, the expensive one dropped her when the FBI got involved, suggests she negotiate a plea deal. But here's where the story gets really satisfying. The civil case moves towards summary judgment in my favor because there's literally no disputing the facts. I own the land, she stole it, she built houses without permission, and she tried to sell them for profit. Case closed. Fortress Insurance settles with me for the full construction costs plus damages, which comes to just over $2.3 million. They also agree to let the three families purchase title insurance for their homes at actual construction cost, not the inflated prices Dolores was charging. The bank, desperate to avoid being part of a criminal conspiracy, agrees to restructure the construction loan with me as the legitimate property owner. This means I can offer the families legitimate purchase contracts at fair prices, about $400,000 each instead of the $850,000 Dolores was trying to scam them for. The mini twist that makes everything perfect. During the investigation, authorities discover that Dolores attempted this same scheme in Arizona and Texas before coming to Pine Ridge. The FBI connects her case to a broader investigation of interstate real estate fraud, and suddenly my local property dispute becomes evidence in a federal racketeering case. My situation isn't just resolved, it's become a legal precedent that's helping other victims across the country. The rental income reality works exactly like I planned. The families appreciate stable housing at below-market rates while they save money for down payments on homes they'll actually own. I earn enough to quit electrical work and focus on property management and community building full-time. That evening, I walk the perimeter of my property with the same measuring tape my grandfather used 60 years ago. The texture of the metal feels warm in my hands, like it approves of what we've built here. The sound of evening activities, kids playing, adults talking over fences, someone practicing piano, reminds me that property isn't just about ownership. It's about creating spaces where decent people can build decent lives without fear of predators like Dolores. The town council passes a resolution supporting property rights and starts reviewing HOA oversight regulations to prevent this from happening again. The state legislature introduces a bill inspired by our case requiring financial transparency and criminal background checks for HOA board members. Sometimes fighting back doesn't just solve your own problem. Sometimes it protects the next person from becoming a victim. And that feels better than any revenge I could have imagined. The town hall meeting happens on a Tuesday evening in November, and the community center is packed tighter than Christmas morning. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls, local TV crews setting up cameras in the back. The air buzzes with that electric tension you feel before something big happens. Dolores arrives in handcuffs. She's been transported from county jail for her sentencing hearing, wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashes spectacularly with her usual designer wardrobe. The sound of those shackles echoing across the wooden floor is music to my ears. Metallic justice served with a side of public humiliation. Judge Patricia Hayes presides over the hearing, and she has the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who's seen every kind of criminal excuse imaginable. The families I've been renting to sit in the front row, dressed like they're attending church, with their kids fidgeting but understanding that something important is happening. The prosecutor lays out the case in terms that make everyone in the room gasp. The defendant engaged in a systematic scheme to defraud multiple victims through forged documents, false insurance claims, and theft of real property valued at over $2 million. This was not a moment of poor judgment. This was a calculated criminal enterprise targeting grieving families. When Dolores gets her chance to speak, she delivers a performance that would be hilarious if it weren't so pathetic. "Your Honor," she starts, voice trembling like a leaf in a hurricane, "I was only trying to improve the community. Mr. Morrison abandoned his property, and I believe the HOA had the authority to address the situation through emergency development measures." The entire room erupts in disgusted murmurs. Abandoned property. Like caring for my dying father was a vacation in Hawaii. "Furthermore," she continues, clearly reading from notes her attorney prepared, "my actions were motivated by my experience with similar community improvement projects in California, where HOA development initiatives are more common." That's when I stand up. The room goes dead silent as I walk to the microphone, carrying my grandfather's original 1967 deed and a surveyor's map that shows exactly where my property boundaries have been for 60 years. "Your Honor, I'd like to address the defendant's claims about abandoned property and community improvement." Judge Hayes nods. "Proceed, Mr. Morrison." I hold up the deed so everyone can see it, including the TV cameras. "This document shows that my family has owned this land since 1967. I have never missed a property tax payment, never missed an HOA fee, and never abandoned anything. I was in Nebraska for 12 months caring for my dying father." The silence in that room is so complete you could hear a pin drop on carpet. "As for community improvement," I continue, turning to face Dolores directly, "stealing someone's land to build houses you plan to sell for personal profit isn't community improvement. It's called theft. And trying to charge the victim of your crime $50,000 in fake fees isn't creative bookkeeping, it's extortion." That's when I deliver the line that's probably going to end up on YouTube forever. "But here's the thing, Dolores. You picked the wrong family to steal from, and you definitely picked the wrong community to terrorize. Because when people work together to stand up to bullies, the bullies always lose." The applause starts slowly with Mrs. Henderson clapping, then builds like thunder as the entire room joins in. People are standing, cheering, and I can see the TV reporters frantically taking notes. Judge Hayes bangs her gavel for order, but she's fighting back a smile. The sentencing comes down like a hammer. 3 years in federal prison, full restitution of $2.3 million, and 5 years of probation with financial monitoring. Dolores breaks down crying when she realizes her criminal career just ended with a very public thud. But the real satisfaction comes when the HOA board, the new one, elected after we threw out all of Dolores's cronies, presents their report on the community's finances. Bob Peterson, now serving as treasurer, announces that after recovering the stolen funds and receiving my donated rental income, the Pine Ridge Community Foundation has enough money to fund a scholarship program for local kids to attend trade schools. The three families stand up to address the crowd, and Mrs. Rodriguez's words hit me right in the chest. "6 months ago, we thought we were buying houses. What we actually found was a community that fights for each other. That's worth more than any house." The local TV news broadcasts the hearing live, and Jessica wins a regional journalism award for her investigative series. Property rights advocacy groups share footage nationwide, and legal experts praise the case as a model for HOA accountability. That night, we celebrate with a potluck dinner on the land where this whole nightmare started. The smell of grilled burgers and the sound of kids playing in what's now officially a community gathering space feels like victory tastes. Sometimes justice isn't just about punishment. Sometimes it's about proving that decent people can build something better from the wreckage of someone else's greed. 6 months later, Pine Ridge Estates looks like a completely different place. The sound that wakes me up every morning isn't construction equipment or legal arguments. It's kids riding bikes to school and neighbors actually talking to each other over coffee instead of filing complaints about mailbox colors. The three families successfully purchased their homes at actual construction cost, which saved them over $400,000 each compared to Dolores's inflated prices. The Hendersons, Patels, and Rodriguez family have become some of my closest friends, which is funny considering we started as landlord and tenants in the weirdest circumstances imaginable. I used the profit from the insurance settlement and rental income to establish the Pine Ridge Community Foundation. And let me tell you, it feels good to see money that was stolen through greed being used to help people build better lives. We've already provided zero-interest loans for 4 first-time home buyers and funded scholarships that help 12 local kids attend trade schools. The memorial garden I built in the corner of my property honors my grandfather's memory with native plants and a simple granite bench where people can sit and think about what really matters. The smell of lavender and sage reminds me that some things grow stronger after they've been tested by hard times. I finally built that retirement cabin I'd been planning for 30 years. It's nothing fancy, just a simple place where I can watch sunsets and remember the man who taught me that integrity isn't negotiable, no matter what someone offers to buy it for. The systemic changes that came out of our fight matter more than personal victory. The state passed the HOA Accountability Act, requiring financial transparency and criminal background checks for board members. Local authorities created a property rights hotline for people dealing with similar disputes, and the real estate industry adopted stricter title verification procedures to prevent this kind of fraud. Law schools now teach our case as an example of effective community organizing against institutional corruption. Real estate courses use it to show why proper documentation matters. Even the FBI includes it in their training materials for investigating organized property crimes. Dolores served 18 months before being released to a halfway house where she's required to work minimum wage jobs to pay restitution. She moves to a different state after completing her sentence, subject to federal probation monitoring that tracks her finances for the next decade. The woman who thought she could steal her way to prosperity now can't open a bank account without government oversight. 3 other states have prosecuted similar cases based on our investigation, and Dolores faces additional charges in Arizona for a scheme targeting a military family. She's become a cautionary tale in property management circles and HOA training seminars, but the best part isn't what happened to her, it's what we built from her wreckage. The annual Community Day Festival raises money for local charities and brings together neighbors who might never have spoken otherwise. This year we funded playground equipment for the elementary school and a small business loan program for local entrepreneurs. The neighborhood that Dolores tried to control through fear has become a place where people actually help each other. Property values have grown steadily, not because of intimidation and forced conformity, but because people want to live in a community where neighbors support each other instead of filing complaints over grass height. As I write this, Mitch just called about the city threatening to condemn his workshop through eminent domain so some developer can build a strip mall. The developer claims it's for community improvement, but something about the timing and the suspicious paperwork feels familiar. I smile as I tell him, "Mitch, remember what happened the last time someone tried to steal property in this neighborhood? These people apparently don't learn from other people's mistakes. Some folks never understand that when you try to build your fortune on other people's misery, eventually you run into someone who knows how to fight back." If you've got an HOA nightmare story, drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and maybe yours will be next week's video. These property rights battles are happening everywhere, and the more we share our stories, the harder it gets for predators to find victims. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because knowledge is power, and power protects the people who know how to use it. Remember, your property is your heritage. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The sound of children playing in the distance, on land that's finally being used the way it should be, reminds me that sometimes the best revenge is just building something better than what the criminals tried to destroy.